Welcome. Welcome everyone coming to our events on gender and R&I. I'm Timothy Young, a research fellow at CEPS. So I will do a brief introduction before handing over the floor to our speakers. This event is a part of a bigger project on EU R&I and health policy funded by the Gates Foundation. So the project contains a work stream on EU R&I policy, mainly the FP10 or the Horizon Europe, a stream on health, including global health, and the involvement of HERA in particular. And also there is a cross-cutting theme on the involvement of the low and middle income countries. More importantly, for our guests today, we do have a stream on gender. Gender has been mentioned as an important component of EU framework program. But often the gender issue are dealt with three main dimensions. Number one is the gender equality in the research team. Number two is the gender equality in the decision-making process of a consortium. Number three is the integration of the gender dimension in the research and innovation process. But sometimes things, to be fair, not just about gender, things are becoming box checking activities. So we really want to see what we can do or what the Commission can do more to further the progress on gender equalities. So we want to see number one, which is about the research agenda and research priorities, whether the Commission, whether the EU really address the most relevant research topic in gender. So today we will present to you our research work on the gender in R&I, followed by the interventions and comments of our guest speakers. So I would like to introduce our two authors of this research work. Marta Dell'Aquila. She is a PhD in philosophy from University Paris 1 Pantheon Sorbonne. Her professional and academic work has centered on feminist issues across academia and international organization with a focus on intersectionality, women's autonomy, the care economy, and more recently on gender inequalities in R&I. And also we have Rukudzo Nyoka, a brilliant young research assistant at CEPS, a master in transnational governance from the EUI in Florence. Rukudzo has a background working in sexual reproductive health rights. Currently, she's working on R&I and international partnership in development. So not to waste any further time, so I would like to pass the time to Marta and Rukudzo to begin the presentation and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim, and welcome to everybody. Forgive the tech glitch. I actually have a statistic on how there are few women in tech, so maybe this is like the first representation of demonstration for that. So today, Marta and I will be representing our paper, Gender Mainstreaming in Research and Innovation Across Europe. So what we start by doing is to identify some of the successes that we have experienced over the past framework programs, the gaps, and we also go on to look and show you our framework to identify those gaps, and then we go on and give some of the recommendations that we feel will be, appropriate to take on in the next coming framework program. So I will take you first to the main achievements that we have seen under Horizon Europe. And I'd like to acknowledge that we have seen incremental steps from the different and previous framework programs, but I'm going to focus particularly on the ones that we have seen under Horizon Europe. So, firstly, we see gender equality and gender mainstreaming as being recognized as core priorities under Horizon Europe. And this is very important because it addresses the persistent gender gaps and intersecting inequalities on all research and innovation research activities. Secondly, gender equality plans have been made mandatory since 2022 to all public institutions. And this is really important because it expands the gender mainstreaming research into work and organizational structures. So we are not seeing gender only within, research and innovation work streams, but it is also being incorporated in the way that researchers work and into their organizational culture, of course. Thirdly, we see a systematic integration of gender perspectives into research content unless otherwise specified. So the Commission has done away with gender flagging topics, which actually then promotes the universal integration of gender perspectives in research. We also see dedicated work streams on gender studies and intersectionality. A good example is the widening work program. And this actually is really important because it increases the research outcomes that particularly focus on gender, producing gender research or gender-centered outcomes. We also see an increased attention to gender-based violence in academia and higher places of education, highlighting a really spoken about challenges that particularly female researchers face. And I would like to also take this opportunity to recognize programs like the UNICEF program that was funded by the Commission. And I'm happy that Maria and Marcella are here today, and they'll probably touch on it. So these kind of programs are really important in highlighting gender-based violence, particularly when it comes to work and research for women. Lastly, we see an expanding scope. Where Horizon Europe is the first EU research and innovation program that has put forward the option of the self-identification as non-binary. And this is important because it ties on to the point of intersectionality. So we are seeing a diverse range of voices being represented into research. So secondly, I will go into some of the key figures that we saw when we were working on this paper. Most of the figures we got them are from some reports by the Commission. So we see that women represent only 34% of researchers at an EU level, which is an increase from 33% from the last framework program. Still, since it's an increase, it's still very, very little. And we would really love to see more women getting into the space of research. We also have 98% of publications lacking a gender dimension, further emphasizing the need to have gender mainstreaming within research and innovation work streams. So also currently women are just represent 9% of inventors, which is a very low figure when it comes to women working in the startup space. And another staggering figure that we actually found under this particular point is only 7% of women have access to venture capital funding. So imagine the billions of dollars that are being put forward and only 7% of women have access to that funding. We also see that in Horizon Europe, 38% of the researchers are female. And another very painful point when it comes to this one is as as career progression goes up, we see a lot of women falling through, and hence we have very few researchers that are female in higher places of authority or in managerial positions. So this is something that also needs to be looked at. And then there's a share of only 31% of women-led consortia. And going back to my dry joke on STEM and ICT. 1 in 3 women graduates are in STEM, and 1 in 5 are ICT specialists. So this is actually very sad, and we can also see this with particular work streams and framework programs under Cluster 4 in Pillar 2 on digital industry and space. It's one of the work programs where women are fewly represented. But I know that these statistics, they seem very grim, but it is important to also highlight some of the good things that have happened under Horizon Europe. So currently 51% of the participants in Horizon Europe boards and expert groups are women. And we also have 81% of the calls for R&I now representing a gender dimension, which can probably be attributed to some of the steps and positive impacts that we have seen the Commission put forward. So I'll now leave to Marta to delve in a little bit further into our work.
Thank you, Rukudzo, and thank you, Timothy, for the presentation. So I will now explain a little bit better what we did in our study. So in our study, we rethought the way in which gender equality is integrated into research, and we developed this new theoretical framework that is not thought to substitute what we have at the moment in Horizon Europe, but it is thought more in terms of complementing what we have. So at the moment, as Timothy said before, we have 3 levels of integration of gender equality in Horizon Europe. First, the fact of having a gender equality plan to qualify for funding. Second, the fact of integrating the gender aspect into research and innovation content and methodology unless otherwise specified. And third, the fact of having gender balance in a research team, expert groups, evaluation committees, and boards. And on top of that, we have also seen, as Rukudzo underlined, specific calls on gender studies and intersectionality. So what we propose is this framework where gender equality in R&I is conceived not in terms of levels, but in terms of 3 different dimensions that are codependent and that benefit each other. So a structural dimension, an epistemic dimension, and a substantive dimension. The structural dimension is mainly refers to all the formal requirements and policies that have been implemented in order to foster gender equality and gender balance. The main example are gender equality plans, and as a consequence, the fact of having gender balance in research team, expert groups, evaluation committees, and boards. Then we have this epistemic dimension that is defined as how knowledge is produced. So literally is the fact of integrating meaningfully gender dimension into content and methodologies. And finally, we have the substantive dimension. That is the part that concerns content, meaning the fact of having specific work streams on gender studies and intersectionality. And we also had the fact of involve gender experts and women-led organization when we lead specific topic, when we research on specific topic, in order to also include some more lived experience when we define and we lead our research. So given that now gender equality plans are mandatory since 2022, as Rukudzo underlined, we focused our analysis a little bit more on the epistemic and on the substantive dimension. And so for the epistemic dimension, in order to carry out our analysis, we focused specifically on 2 clusters under Pillar 2 of Horizon Europe: health and food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture, and environment. We chose these 2 clusters specifically because we analyze how much the gender dimension is important to be included in these 2 clusters, and also because these 2 clusters in particular concern the entire society. And what we assessed using a matrix with a list of questions in the research is that we identified that as a positive point, there is a growing use of intersectional approaches and reference to intersectionality in the work programs from 2021 to 2025, because we arrived until 2025. But still, there are some topics that explicitly do not require the gender integration. So as a consequence, the framing of gender requirements remain a little bit ambiguous. And sometimes the fact that it is not mandatory can be perceived still as a tick box exercise rather than using the gender dimension as with proper analytical lens. And above all, we also saw that there is a very, very low emphasis on collecting sex and gender disaggregated data in both clusters, but this is something that we also seen in the other clusters. And there is also a limited and unclear requirement for collaboration with gender experts and women's-led organization or civil society organization. For concerning the substantive dimension, so we mapped gender-related topics and actions under Horizon Europe, under the different pillars, to assess how effectively the gender dimension is integrated in the program. So we use specific criteria to select the topics, and we identified 6 thematic areas. So the first one is gender equality in research innovation, including women in STEM, where we saw that there is the largest number of topics that have been funded and project. Gender technology and digitalization, gender-based violence, gender in the labor market that we also saw is well represented, intersectional gender inequalities, and gender and societal democracy. Then we also explored what are the policy priorities that have been identified by, for example, by the European Commission with the Women's Roadmap at the beginning of 2025, by the European Institute for Gender Equality, and also by the OECD. And we did like a cross analysis, and we identified that still there is a lack of topic and calls concerning digitalization, the green transition from a gender perspective. Also, in what concerns the future of work, including the care economy transformation, that this is something on which there has been light during COVID-19 pandemic, but then this is something that has been lost during the year again. Gender-based violence, and last, women's health. So I won't stay too much on this because we have a brilliant expert today that will cover the topic, but women's health is still a systemic blind spot in the framework program, in the past framework program and the actual framework program. So there have been different studies published recently, even after the publication of our report. And despite the limitations of specific studies, what is clear is that women's health is still underrepresented, and there are systemic bias in the healthcare, and there is a clear mandate for EU action in order to make this topic visible and more funded, and everything that as a consequence of the fact of making more visible a specific topic and gap. And now I will give the floor back to Rukudzo, who will present our recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marta. So I will now take you through the 7 recommendations that we have put forward. So the first one is to align gender policy priorities with gender research priorities. And we believe that this promotes evidence-based decision-making and also strengthens the partnerships between government, researchers, and other stakeholders in coming up with sound policies that are actually backed by research outcomes. Secondly, we recommend the promotion of intersectional research and intersectional mainstreaming, because this actually portrays the different experiences that different social groups experience. It also highlights the hidden inequalities that people face, which will then translate into policies that are sound and that represent the different social groups in society. Thirdly, we recommend the enforcement of existing guidelines to ensure meaningful gender mainstreaming in research content. And we believe that this will actually ensure that research outcomes are meaningfully consider gender mainstreaming and not as a tick box exercise. We also call for the strengthening of gender equality plans and to extend their mandatory scope to all legal entities. So currently, the gender equality plans, as I said before, they are mandatory to public institutions. So we think that by actually extending their scope, we'll be able to see gender mainstreaming going beyond just the work stream of research and innovation, but also into organizational culture. Also, then having a positive trickle effect to how researchers work, particularly female researchers. We also recommend to leverage the Horizon Europe cooperation collaboration with associated and non-associated countries to promote gender equality beyond the EU. We believe that the EU has the capacity and influence to create a positive ripple effect that promotes equality and promotes the integration of gender mainstreaming, and particularly the promotion of female researchers in associated and non-associated countries that participate under Horizon Europe. We also recommend to standardize and further develop the gender budget tracking tool that has been developed by the European Commission, which we feel like currently it does a great job of highlighting the amount of money that has been contributed towards gender-related topics. But we believe that this tool can actually be extended by adding metrics on research outcomes that prove meaningful integration of gender mainstreaming. So these metrics could include, the production or collection of gender disaggregated data. Lastly, we recommend that the Commission provides guidelines on topics which cannot integrate the gender dimension into research. I think Marta highlighted that there are some topics where, you're allowed not to integrate the gender dimension. So, and also this is left at the discretion of researchers. So we believe that these guidelines should be clearly outlined in on which exceptional circumstances topics may not may exclude the gender dimension. So with that was our paper. It is available. I think you have leaflets where you can actually scan the QR code and go into a deep dive and read it. And I will now leave over to Marta, who will be facilitating our panel today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rukudzo. So good afternoon, everyone, again, and thank you for joining us today, and thank you to our panelists, not only for being here today, but also for the excellent contribution that you have made over the years, that several of which were used also in our report. So it's great to have you here around the table today, literally. So we are here today to talk about gender equality in research innovation, a topic that many of us know well and that continues to evolve. These panels, this conversation will bring together both policy, academics, perspectives, and this mix is very important because progress in gender equality depends not only to policy design, but also on how policies are interpreted, implemented, and experienced within research system on the ground. And I'll say this more on a personal capacity as someone who has worked on feminist issues for a long time. I know how much is important to look at both levels at once when we discuss this topic. So the formal structure, but also what really happens on the ground every day in the lived experience. So today we will discuss mainly where we are heading. So how these commitments translate into concrete instruments, recommendations, but also into the kind of knowledge that we produce. And before we start, let me introduce our panel. So we're very pleased to have here today Katerina Zvikova, who is the head of the gender sector at DG Research and Innovation. We have Marcela Linkova, who is the member state co-chair for the ERA Forum subgroup on inclusive gender equality and head of the Center for Gender and Size on the Institute of Sociology, Czech Academic of Science. We have with us also Maria Bustelo, who is Associate Professor of Political Science and Administration for the Complutense University of Madrid, and Director of Women's and Science Unit at the Spanish Ministry of Science, Innovation and Universities. And we have Fionn Swear-Jones, who is a Senior Policy and Advocacy Officer at the Brussels office of the DSW. So we will begin the panel today with a brief institutional perspective, and then we will move gradually closer to research systems and researchers themselves, before handing with a concrete example of why gender equality in R&I matters beyond institution and why all these matter in practice. So I will start with you. We will start with you, Katerina, because I just forgot to tell you that we have people also connected online. So I will ask you to speak into the microphone. So over the past year, we have seen a number of initiative and EU-funded projects that have demonstrated how gender equality in research and innovation can be addressed in structured and meaningful way. But at the same time, discussion around the next framework program, Horizon Europe FP10, have already highlighted how much is important to keep this dimension and make it more meaningful. So from the institutional side, I would like to ask you, could you briefly highlight some example of approaches or projects that have worked well in advancing gender equality in research and innovation, and how these experiences reflected in what has been proposed so far for the next framework program?
Thank you, Marta. And first, before I get into the question and reply, I would like to thank you and CEPS for inviting me, and also for preparing this study and making it available. It is, we have read it, and it's always such studies, and this study as well, a valuable external look at our work that we are doing in the European Commission and DG RTD and research executive agencies as well, based on the thorough analysis. And the look that you have done, the approach is quite productive, really looking at how the different dimensions of work on gender mainstreaming can mutually reinforce each other, or vice versa, potentially weaken one another if certain pieces are missing. So now to your question, which goes very directly to the heart of the matter of the future. Here maybe I indeed start by FP10, for which the Commission presented its proposal in July. So it is now known, it is made public, and FP10 is a part of a package with, I will highlight in particular the European Competitiveness Fund, and a proposal for a horizontal regulation on establishing a budget expenditure tracking and performance framework that will cover union programs and activities. This is important because this is a big difference compared to the current setup, current framework program for research, or in general setup of the funding programs of the European Union. Now, in the future FP10, as well as proposal, as well as the other proposals, the Commission remains fully committed to gender equality as a core principle of the program, and gender equality is mainstreamed and harmonized across the programs, and that is the novelty via this draft proposal for the performance regulation. So the idea is to ensure that their application is harmonized across most EU programs from the start of the MFF. So not necessarily of interest for here, for research itself, but I'm just want to pass this message that there is an effort to lift all boats, actually on the good example of Horizon Europe currently, of what we have been doing there and achieved. Now, the proposal itself for Horizon Europe explicitly states that Horizon Europe will ensure the effective promotion of gender equality and equal opportunity. There is a recital which also reiterates the importance of this, and gender mainstreaming, integration of gender dimension in R&I content, attention to gender balance in evaluation panels, boards, and expert groups. So I'm raising this here because we have heard in the study, this is important. This is intended to continue. And there are also some open issues, such as gender equality plans, which you won't find in the FP10 proposal, which the idea there is to address them at the level of the future Horizon Europe work program, so under FP10. Here I'm speaking about the FP10 Horizon Europe work programs, and that's consistent with the current practice. And also, for example, the methodology for tracking expenditure on gender equality, that's also not yet defined, that will have to be updated for the future. So the message here is that the proposals contain much continuity with the current provisions in Horizon Europe and build and our experience with them, with implementing them. The whole proposal package is now in the hands of the European Parliament and of the Council. And we will, of course, see the negotiations, the results of the negotiations as they come out and in the future. So here, this is basically all that is feasible to say what will be in Horizon in the next FP10, because it's not in our hands right now. But before we have the next MFF and FP10, there will be other initiatives shaping the future, about which I want to also speak, into which our experience can also flow. The European Research Area Act, which is planned for the second half of this year. And here it will address the remaining challenges for the full implementation of the European Research Area. Why is it important here? The structural change is pushed through the framework also of the European Research Area. So the gender equality plans, for example, they are part of the organizations and institutions. And it will be part of this act as well, gender equality. And the second initiative will be the action plan for women in R&I, research and innovation and startups. And that is a commitment of our commissioner made publicly during her confirmation hearing in the European Parliament. And we are now currently working on it. And this action plan will give us an opportunity to take stock where we are now in the current political context, based on the insights I will talk about. And also this analysis will help us kind of see where we can further focus our efforts to make a difference. And for example, this study is part of this reflection, part of the process that can get into the reflection. A public consultation for the action plan should be launched in the next days. So that's also something to watch out. Now, all this builds on the experience and insights generated over many years and framework programs, and by many people and elements involved. And you have asked about projects. If I was to name them, we would be here for the whole afternoon. So there have been many projects, just focusing, for example, on gender equality plans as one of the strongest tools that we have for structural change. We had 37 implementation projects for gender equality plans, in which more than 350 organizations participated over several framework programs, and were supported by almost 80 million euros. And these projects, over time, there have been several generations of these projects. They have gradually built up the knowledge about how to actually foster and support and implement structural change towards gender equality in organizations. What does it take? How does it need to be potentially anchored in policies? So these projects have really been crucial, not only to actually do change in the organizations and institutions, to project, to spread the knowledge, but also to inform policy and push for policy. Just to illustrate one project that concluded in July 2025 and started as a Horizon 2022 project, Mind the CEPS. Here we have, for example, learned about how for collection of data, analysis, qualitative interviews, and how you build up the knowledge base in the organizations for the JEPs, but how you also need to build networks and stepwise institutional change. just to stay with the projects, there is a report now, very recent one, that summarizes the insights of 23 EU-funded projects. We have published it. I can provide a link, and that can be a very interesting resource. Now, beyond projects, it's important to say as well that what has been informing the policies and the implementation has been the collaboration with the member states and stakeholders in the context of the ERA Forum subgroup. Marcela is here as our co-chair. Here, there have been also already concrete deliverables, like the Zero Tolerance Code of Conduct against gender-based violence, and a guidance on principles for the integration of inclusive gender analysis. Now, I hope that before I conclude, I mentioned projects, I mentioned the member states, the subgroup. I would like to mention the institutions, of course, because much of, for example, the recommendations you have, much of the insights that go into the proposals come from the implementation by the Commission, by the research, by the executive agencies supporting the research. I could illustrate it on the integration of the gender dimension. Maybe if there is time in the discussion, I'm happy also to talk more about it. But now concluding, I hope that from what I have said here, it is clear how all the achievements so far have been work of many and building on rich data, knowledge and experience. And this matters both for implementation and for shaping future initiatives. And this is why I'm happy to be here with all participants and with all my fellow panelists, and just work together and keen on your insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katerina. So what comes through what you were saying is also that policy framework do more than setting rules, but also they define what is value, what is rewarding, and what is seen as essential for a strong research system. So this connects to a broader question about the environment in which research takes place. And the values that also shape these environments. And now I'll turn it to you, Marcela, because when we talk about the European research area, we often talk about cooperation, openness, and the conditions that allow research to be done. So how do you see gender equality contributing to a strong and open research environment?
So first of all, congratulations on the report to you and Rukudzo. Really well done. And I have to say that your analysis really strikes a chord. And I think that you will also see when I speak that the recommendations that you're making are very much aligned with what the ERA Forum subgroup was recommending in its, for example, position on Framework Program 10 or some of our other outputs. So I think that we have a really robust diagnosis and agreement of what needs to happen, and I will address some of that. So I think that on a very elementary level, we cannot have successful European research area without inclusive gender equality. And it really pains me that working for maybe 25 years on this topic that I still need to make this point, because we have enough knowledge and insight that should, build the evidence base for making this claim. So I will now go into some of the details of where I see we need to move forward with the policies. I will be speaking with the head of the ERA Forum subgroup, and this reflects the positions of what we're recommending. I really welcome, and I think that we all agree on this, we need to acknowledge the progress that has been made in the past, let's say 5 to 7 years, because it's in a way, it's really staggering what we have managed to accomplish. And I think that this is also the reason we need to continue and go further and deeper, as you also say in your report. We have also heard that we are now at a critical time. The negotiations for the next framework program are ongoing, and these are always critical times. Those of you who do policy analysis know that when we move from one policy cycle to the next, that's when there is a huge opportunity to move forward, but there's also huge risk to lose everything. And we have experienced this on the transition from Framework Program 6 to Framework Program 7. We, in fact, used to have gender action plans. There was gender toolkit to help integrate the gender dimension. And all of this was simplified. And then it took us many years to build up the policy momentum again, where we picked up. And now we have not the same tools, but very similar tools. And so what I want to stress is that to me, this is really not an efficient way of making public policies. This, in fact, is, I would argue, very irresponsible way of making policies, but also a huge waste of public money. It is very easy to undo things. And I think that we all agree that we are seeing this in the last year really at full. But it's then very difficult to restart. And it's also expensive because you lose people and you lose expertise. And I understand that it may not be sexy for policymakers to continue doing something that someone else started before them in the previous policy cycle. They want to come up with the next best thing. But inclusive gender equality is the best next thing. So for researchers, for research, and for society, because our understanding of the world and our challenges in the world and our solutions to those challenges in the world are better with intersectionality and gender considerations on board. And this is what responsible policymaking is about. So we need to really embed and gender mainstream gender in everything that we do in research. So I want to make 3 points that the ERA Forum subgroup on inclusive gender equality is advancing. One is on intersectionality and inclusiveness, and we have already heard this. We have the gender equality plans and the gender dimension in research and innovation. And yes, this is a huge blind spot, and admittedly, we are fumbling. The Commission is funding very important projects to advance, and we will continue this work in the ERA Forum subgroup. But this is really something where we are starting, and we need further insight into how institutions advance measures to counteract intersectional inequalities. We're definitely not there. Gender research has already been mentioned. It's really great that you have done the analysis into where gender research is funded. And it's important to hear the figure from Katerina about the money that goes into this. But in the global scheme of things of framework programs, the funding is negligible. And so this, to me, does not really, portray or speak to gender mainstreaming. We really need to spend more money or ensure, and this is the objective now for FP10, that there will be gender budgeting. And so I think that this is really critical. But with that, we really need to pay attention to funding specifically gender research, gender and feminist research, because we can't rely only on the fact that gender is mainstreamed in the research projects. We need specific gender and feminist research. second point is about mainstreaming gender and embedding it in all the other priorities. I can say that we see that very much across the structural policies and ERA actions currently. And this is a huge shame. From my perspective, the point I want to make, the ERA Forum subgroup published a position paper in December on gender equality and academic freedoms. And I cannot underscore enough how important I think this is, because we have seen huge attacks on academic freedoms, also research integrity. And this is really hugely and importantly linked to safety, recognition of power, what we know, who can know, and it speaks to the epistemic element of what you were talking about. The third is about gender equality plans. And here I will just say we are on a road. These can be very potent instruments. And if they are imperfect, it's because we do not take them seriously. We do not work robustly with them. So we really need to do better monitoring and better compliance checks where these are the instrument. So this is the Commission, but also some member states have implemented CEPS as an eligibility criterion. So I will just conclude by saying that I'm really proud about what the Commission has done, what member states have achieved, what the research performing organizations have done, but I also want to mention the gender equality officers, people responsible for CEPS, because they're doing really the heavy lifting. And I think that we need to acknowledge and have in mind these people, be cognizant of their needs and the care they need and the attention to their well-being in the organizations. And this is something that needs to be also taken care of as part of the CEPS. So this is no time to stop. And we really need to maintain the structures and collaborations that we have.
Thank you very much, Marcela, for your presentation and for, you presented a lot of points, but the fact that simplification cannot be done to the detriment of gender equality, and also on the importance of JEPs and how it is important to maintain and to perceive these tools not as administrative burdens, but of course as more tools for change. It's a very important points. But let's now move a little bit closer to university and research organization, because a lot depends on what really happens in a university and in very practical terms. So for people working in academia, gender equality often shows up through quite concrete things, how careers are structured, how performance is assessed, who ends up in leadership role, how work is distributed, and if I may add, how and if career breaks, part-time work, or career responsibilities are properly considered in evaluation and progression. So these are not always issues that are addressed, but they are central to how research is designed and research careers unfold. So Maria, how does this look from within academia?
Okay, this one. So thank you so much. First of all, I also want to thank you for this invitation to the panel. It is an honor for me to be here, and it is really timely. Because as you said, I have just started as director of the Women and Science Unit at the Spanish Ministry of Science, Innovation and University. So I will change hat a little bit in this time. So it has been really great. And secondly, of course, also congratulations for the report, which I think is really a very good one. It goes to the heart of the structural problems, which requires a structural approach and measures. So And then you are giving ideas for FP10, especially in those two areas. But I think in general, I think it's a very good reflection. So we are really living in a world which we have never imagined just a few years ago, full of threats to all the gender advancements that we have been hardly working on over the last decades. Although this vision should not impede us to see the importance of all these achievements and the recognition that we are much better today than those decades ago. Research and academia are not an exception, but probably because of our commitment with science and evidence, innovation, development, and society, we are even more responsible than others to not only preserve what we have already achieved, but also to find the ways in which we can keep on advancing by finding ways to reach our goals and get more alliances for our endeavor. Alice, with all the different actors in the era and the member states' research systems are key. And panels like this one contribute to this regard, I think. But as said before, the first thing we need to recognize is what we have achieved. And in this sense, I would like to highlight the important role of the European Commission in gender policies in science and research. We have already talked about that. Especially since the structural approach was officially adopted 15 years ago. European projects on structural change have been and still are crucial for these advancements, and we have all learned through these projects. The developments have been immensely successful, as Katerina was mentioning before, and are in track to keep working towards the more structural measures related to the inclusion of a gender perspective in research content without forgetting specific gender institutional measures in member states, RPOs and RFOs. And of course, also what Marcela was saying about funding not only gender mainstreaming, but also feminist and gender research specifically. So we really need to recognize the importance of the European Union towards equality issues, especially in R&D, and at the same time, do whatever we can, and more if possible, for not losing this approach. I think we are all a little bit afraid of the threats that we have. This is extremely important for Europe and also for each member state. So if we focus in the period of these last 2 years, as Marcela was saying, we found fabulous advancements in Horizon Europe. The GIPS eligibility criterion is one of them. The focus on intersectionality and the zero tolerance on gender-based violence policy are immense advancements. However, there is still a long road to travel, and we really need to deepen this approach. Content like the focus on gender-based violence is crucial these days. I would like to do this reflection because although the appearance of cases which were hiding before in different sectors is taking a lot of anti-gender reactions, and this is contributing to this awful opposite ambience, right? I would say the fact that each day are more cases seeing the light means that society will be increasingly, even if it's slowly, digesting a zero tolerance approach. It has happened, for example, you are health people with the anti-tobacco policies, right? For example, right at the beginning there was this reaction in Spain was terrible, and then it's something that society then understand and digest. So I am a little bit optimistic about that. we as research and academic institutions should be well prepared to an increasing number of cases to tackle. So we need to act quickly, as with everything, and I think we can be fairly optimistic with probably with all these reactions, that we will have. The intersectionality focus is a very a very important first step, but we need to develop that approach using our structural approach. And you were saying something on the report. That is not only using intersectionally or using it exclusively to identify vulnerable groups, for example. That is the main thing, but with a more structural approach to other inequalities intersecting with gender. And I think that's really, we have really a road to go. Of course, we need a lot. Marcela has already said something. Monitoring and evaluation, especially with the GIPS. We are very focused. We have been very focused normally in adoption of policies. But as far as we analyzed the implementation, that's another story. And we really need to monitor that implementation. I think that's extremely important. The pilot check of the eligibility criterion showed us that it is possible to only check the box and not really having something transformative, right? Enough as we think that GIPS should go. Most of the GIPS analyzed were falling behind. I mean, and this is really something that we need to do. But not only monitoring the implementation, but also doing evaluation. And doing evaluation for understanding how we can improve, not only for checking the box or for accountability, but for learning and improving. For example, we proved, and we have written things with Rachel Minton and Lud Megard about that, for example, the better regulation approach from the Commission is not valid or useful for evaluating gender mainstreaming and gender structural policies. But of course, having said that, I think that we also need to be strategic and intelligent of what we have in these new scenarios and of anti-gender movements and security threats. I would say that beyond focusing exclusively on women and also in the intersection with other non-privileged stances, we need to understand, develop, and explain why and how privileged voices have an easier road to go in science. So look at it from the other point of view and the effects of those privileges. And of course, insist in human rights as opposed to this idea of each person by themselves, right? That is, and the importance of believing in institutions and public policies. For me, including men in equality policies is a key issue. And linking to excellent research, demonstrating that a fair and inclusive science is a better one. And also, I would say, and we were talking about that with Marcela before, about peace and security. We are going to have a strong emphasis in security. And nobody women and feminists have worked towards peace better. And from the First World War, right? We know a lot. As feminists and as women, we know a lot about peacemaking. So I think that linking peace studies to gender research and academia and a structural change as privileged spaces and arenas to work, I think it could be a good way to also try to put something new to go into this. So I will leave this here because, I have already have this time. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for this presentation and also for underlining two very important topics like the emergence and the strengthening of these anti-gender movements that now this is a reality, and also this link that exists between peace and security study and feminism in general. So it's thanks a lot for this very great presentation. And now I think that we can move a little bit closer to the to specific topics that have been underfunded in the past and present framework program. And women's health is a good example of it, because despite major scientific progress, there are still gaps in how women's health is researched and understood. And these gaps are not due to a lack of expertise, but they're linked to how research priorities have been set and funded over time. So I give the floor to you, Fionn.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, good morning perhaps to those joining online and in the room. My name is Fionn Storer-Jones and I'm here from DSW. We are a global health NGO and I lead up our work on research and innovation. And we have a focus on neglected areas of health globally, including women's health. It's a privilege to join the fellow panelists. Always difficult coming at the end of a panel, especially after so many rich interventions. But I will try to stay on time because I know I'm standing between us and the Q&A. So I think I'd like to start by absolutely reiterating what's been said before, that we've seen immense progress in terms of gender equality considerations under the EU's research framework programs, even in the very short time that I've been here in Brussels following this policy area. And that is thanks to individuals like Katerina and Mina, who came before, for example. But we know both in the public and the private sector that gender equality cannot stand on the shoulders of one or a handful of individuals. And so the importance of systematically considering this issue is vitally important. And so we will certainly be working very hard with our fellow advocates to make sure that the legislative base of this package, as Katerina mentioned, of 4 FP10 for the European Competitiveness Fund and the Performance and Budgeting Regulation really does push forward the efforts to advance gender equality in science, in EU-funded science. I'm usually a basket of ideas, and I hope that I can coherently put across the points that I would like to today. It's January, so I think I'm quietly optimistic, despite the huge backlash that we are seeing against gender equality, intersectionality, inclusiveness, and sexual and reproductive health and rights, particularly an area that is at the core of our work at DSW. The first book I read this year was Jacinda Ardern's A Different Kind of Power. And so I think I am choosing to be bold and to be brave in the face of regression. I think silence is to stand on the side of the oppressor. So I think that we should still be ambitious and not take a cautious approach in trying to move forward, particularly at this critical juncture in policy making, as Marcela mentioned, as we enter into the next MFF. So we look at gender consideration across research and innovation, but our focus is really on health. And so when we look at health, we do need to consider sex as a biological and social variable alongside gender as a social and structural variable, because we know that both of them co-intersect to drive outcomes, health outcomes for individuals. So from the phones that many of you are typing on now, too big for our hands, to the trackable that I'm using now to look at my time, to voice recognition on cars, to PPE that we need in health crises, to seatbelts in cars. The world is designed for men. And this is, particularly in the area of health, an issue of life or death. Despite this, when we look at health research, only about 7% of global health research, and by global health, I mean health research globally, and not just that focusing on the area of global health, goes towards women's health. And much of that is focused on oncology. So we don't see investment in women's health globally, and this is an issue that we do see reflected at the EU level. We certainly see it on the political level more and more, now with an interest group in the European Parliament on women's health that was spearheaded by the European Institute for Women's Health, and we're very proud to have come alongside them as co-hosts for that group. And also from the Commission as well, DGRTD published a publication last year highlighting, I think, over 2 billion euros in women's health has been funded via Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe across 1,000 projects. One of the issues that we see with this, given that this funding is coming from different channels, from the health cluster to ERC to the Innovative Health Initiative as a joint undertaking, for example, is that there is certainly investment, but there is no cohesion, let's say, in how investment decisions are made. And so we have been calling for the establishment of an expert group on women's health research and innovation to help guide a research agenda on women's health to better drive investments where they are needed most from the EU, but in collaboration with member states and international actors, including those in low and middle income countries. Women's health, in our definition, and I think in the broad definition that is now being established, many of you have probably seen women's health more and more in the media, are issues that affect women differently, disproportionately, or exclusively. And so the need to consider sex and gender across these areas is really, really important. We see a lack of funding for women-specific conditions. Was really pleased. I know the CEPS report only comes up to 2024 or 2025, 2024, 5. So there was a call in 2025 on gynecological conditions, which was great to see. But if we look at funding from the EU for issues like menopause, PCOS, postpartum hemorrhage, preterm labor, uterine fibroids, we see very little funding back if we look until 2018. So that mirrors global trends, and we would really like to make sure that women's health is in the legislative basis for Framework Programme 10 and the European Competitiveness Fund, and that then translates into dedicated calls for proposals in the implementation of the next framework programme. Certainly, we have seen progress on sex and gender considerations in the calls for proposals, as the CEPS report highlights, and including in the last work programme for Horizon Europe published at the end of last year, 26-27, for example, seeing calls like understanding of sex and gender or gender-specific mechanisms of cardiovascular diseases, and having the gender dimension and the gender focus in the title of the projects, we know is very, very important. Having worked with researchers working in neglected areas of health, including infectious diseases, we know that the calls for proposals are very competitive. And so for researchers working in areas where funding is limited and their capacities for applying is limited, having that specific language in the calls for proposals is really crucial for driving their work forward. Let me collect my thoughts and make sure I'm going through everything I would like to. Yes, 2.5 minutes. Great, 2 minutes. Okay, my time is not working. So certainly we have seen the gender equality plans have an impact and make a difference. I think we've seen this very concrete support for women in science, but we would really like to see the next framework programme and the next, let's say, generation of the EU's research funding really drive forward science for women. I wrote for the EuroHealth publication for the Gastein Forum at the end of last year, looking at the social contract, why failing to consider sex and gender and failing to invest in women's health is fracturing our social contract. As was mentioned, public money is used to fund public research. And I think at the last count, women made up more than half of the EU's population. We're about half of the world's population. And we are taxpayers. We are also the biggest, have most power usually when it comes to household level healthcare decisions as well. And so it's really a disservice to women, and I think a threat to social cohesion if we continue to neglect sex and gender, particularly in health research. And so mandating sex and gender disaggregated data, so going beyond the requirement to consider them at proposal level and mandating that sex and gender is reported in data, that data is sex and gender disaggregated is really important. I think we see that in the stats you proposed at the start. 81% of calls for proposals address the gender dimension, but 98% of publications lack a gender dimension. So we're not seeing that translation. So certainly want to see that mandated and to see investments via FP10 and the European Competitiveness Fund align with the efforts underway under the Biotech Act and changes to clinical trial regulation to really see a cohesive approach to sex and gender consideration and health research from the bench to the bedside. And for the EU as a funder, but also as a powerful regulator to incentivize the private sector to also move forward on these points and also to use its leadership globally. As Ursula von der Leyen, a Commission President, said in her State of the Union speech at the end of last year, that the EU will step up where others have stepped away and to really hold its leadership at the EU level and globally to push to make sure that we really have excellent science. And to have excellent science, we really need to have equal science.
Thank you very much, Fionn, for this presentation and also for giving so direct and precise recommendation. And also, I just wanted to underline something that you said about the fact of mentioning women's health and using specific terms also in the title of project. That is more or less what also we did in our study, and this makes a lot of difference also in how specific phenomena and problems are perceived. So thank you very much. And now we have a bit of time to open the discussion to the audience, but also for the panelists if you want to react. We'd really welcome your questions or comments if there is. Good. So we can use the
Thank you very much. Thanks and congratulations to all those who participated in this report that I'm looking forward to reading because I haven't seen it yet.
Sorry, can I please ask you to introduce yourself, just your name and organization? Thanks very much.
My name is Annette Dumas, and I am here representing the European Institute of Women's Health. I would just like to make an announcement in line with what has been said today, because I think it's a good illustration of the way forward. We will be launching the European Institute of Women's Health EU strategy on the 3rd of February in the European Parliament. And this will cover many areas that you have addressed today. And the other thing is that we are looking forward at involving as many people as possible to make sure that we all work together and the agenda is fully covered. So there's a lot of information on the LinkedIn page for the European Institute of Women's Health. You're most welcome to come. And you're also most welcome to support the EU health strategy that we are launching if you feel that that's in line with what you're doing, your priorities. But thanks again. And yeah, women's health, gender segregated data is definitely something that we are looking at the unmet medical needs of women in the field of health, because there are so many areas that are not covered yet.
where we need more research. And as you also mentioned, women in security, women's rights is also a very big topic, looking at all the different overarching areas that are influencing women's health. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And there is another question there.
Sergei Kasyanov, Harvard Alumni Organization. I would like to ask about connection between mothers and children on temporary protection from Ukraine. I think since last year in Belgium, they don't grant temporary protection status to the women who received it, on the reason that children have not been born before year 2022, which was a year of full-scale invasion of Russia. So how do you assess what this policy aimed at, separation of mothers and children? Merci.
Anyone else before?
We might collect a few questions, and if there are any, please don't be shy.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the speakers. I am tasked to inject kind of dimension or the perspective from men. So I do have a question. I find it so relevant, but feel free not to answer it. Okay. So my question is, are there any narratives to relate gender to everybody's welfare, including men's welfare? The reason is, if you want to change the institution of society, there are some barriers. Why? Because not everybody agrees that it has to be changed, or not everybody sees the benefits. So that means if we can relate, gender issues, gender dimension to everybody's welfare, including men's welfare, it will be much easier to implement changes, make fundamental changes to the society. So then my question is, are there any narratives developing right now so that we can change that? You can say the common mistake that gender is only a problem of a certain gender. Thank you.
We most definitely have the narratives, because gender is not about women. But I understand that we continually need to stress that. But of course, a lot of the arguments and examples, especially from health, but also other areas, go to the crux of the issue that men lose out in the unequal gender regime in which we live. Perhaps not as much as women, but they lose very much too. It has a negative impact on their mental health. It has negative impact on men's well-being, men's ability to participate in childcare to the full. So there are really many areas where this is true. The problem, perhaps, in communicating this is that since gender stereotypes are so deeply entrenched, it's very difficult to acknowledge and own these issues for men. And so, in fact, in our gender order, it takes a lot of courage on the part of men to be vocal about some of these issues. And I think that in relation to mental health, for example, we see changes. From my experience, I think that communicating gender dimension in research is perhaps easier than addressing gender inequalities in the organization of research organizations. Because even if, for example, men will not recognize so much how gender dimension relates to them personally, they will understand how that might impact the women in their lives. And I don't very much like this argument, but it is effective. But we also need to get on board with the other part, and that is acknowledging the power differentials in the research organizations and the unequal distribution of power, which then translates into toxic environments, gender-based violence, and all these things. And there, I think that we really need cooperation with research into psychology and how to communicate issues that may be threatening to people because they feel, well, but I'm not that type of guy. But if we do not all speak against this sort of behavior, then maybe we are that sort of people.
Yeah. No. This one. Right. Okay. Yeah, because I was the one saying that I think that men should be included in gender equality. And it is true. What you said is really important because there are all these narratives that are there, right? We were talking over lunch and I was telling about one item that it is in the surveys from the national statistics that they are, I mean, young people and people are asked with one item, which is, do you think that gender equalities have gone too far? Who the hell wrote that?
Comment? No, because no, I am not gender researcher, but for me, for me, it does matter. You know, it does matter. For example, gender situation as regards to women's rights are worsening right now. I saw the statistics. For me, and in this respect, to speak now about men's, it's a bit for me, for example, unusual. We have many still problems unresolved with women's. So and for it's interesting for me also, for example, what is the effect of these Horizon Europe projects? For example, how much people use it? Because I've been myself writing Horizon applications and I know how people is writing these gender equality plans. They are copy pasting something which been written. It's nothing which is getting very to sense of organizations. Because how many professors women we have still at universities, this number is not increasing a lot. And I myself worked for some years in research at European Commission, and I saw many discriminations still also within European that this let's say approach for gender equality is rather formal, but it's still not getting let's say to core even of officials of Commission. So for me, for example, indeed, what question would be how do you see effectiveness of these Horizon Europe projects? Let's say spillover effects. Did you measure them? Thank you.
Maria, if you want to finish your point,
to
please.
finish, to start. I mean, I was thinking about that this narrative, probably even with what you were asking for, probably the data is not as bad as probably the narrative is saying to us that it is, right? Because of course, I was talking about what it is to do. I mean, if you do a question like that, you are going to have a lot of positive responses about that. You are creating a narrative that the gender equality policies have gone too far. And of course, when we talk about gender relations, and of course, it is not about women. That's the problem. Gender is about power relations between genders, right? So I really believe that working, it's not easy. Working about privileges, about recognizing privileges. It's painful. it's painful. And we can also, as women from Europe, white women from Europe or whatever, we can recognize what is that. But I think it's a very promising way of working, and at the same time with a narrative that we need to maintain our democracy and we need to work for human rights, right? Because it is about power, and the problem is it has been always an unequal power relation. So it is completely normal, I would say, regular, that we are talking about women because they are the weak ones, right? We are the weak ones. Of course, with all the intersectionality thing, with the gender-based violence, I think. I just going to share something that I think it's very promising. It's something that it was told by a colleague, and I have done this in my classes, and it's very promising. And is that you with groups of students that they should be mixed. I mean, women and men, and you just let them ask them that they start talking about what was the last time that they were afraid because of something that they were. And it is just incredible how boys, boys discover the fear that women normally have when they have, it's something incredible. And they start, so I really think that recognizing those privileges is a really good way to go. I don't know if I have answered you, or at least, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe I say a few words. I just wanted to, yeah, thank you. On what the gentleman said about mothers and children and Ukraine. I am. Yeah, I just wanted to say, to acknowledge that this is hurt, but and I'm sad about it. But I fear this is something not of a subject of this conversation, and I'm not the right interlocutor, and I believe maybe other colleagues are not the right interlocutors either for this here. So, and moving then on the impact of projects and of maybe the policies as well, we do see positive impacts. This is, for example, every 3 years, we publish a flagship report, She Figures, since 2003, that already allows us also to see developments over time and track. And one indicator from which really improved was women in leadership positions over time. So there we see. So something must be done right, that we see these positive shifts. So I invite you to look it up. We published, the latest edition is the 2024 edition, which came out at the beginning of last year. And now we are already working on the next, which will be published in 2027. We also look, of course, at impacts of our policies. So even Horizon Europe, including the gender equality provisions, were part of an interim evaluation of Horizon Europe, where we also see a rather positive assessment. And for the CEPS, gender equality plans, we have committed a study to actually assess the impact of gender equality plans and of the in general. And this study as well identified, not of the criterion yet itself, but of CEPS, of the requirement. And it again found that it had impacts. Just even raising the topic in the national contexts led to even adoption of policies at a national level. It also led to adoption of gender equality plans by organizations which were not subject to the CEP criterion, So they just decided, oh, that might be a good thing for us to do. And maybe that will also improve the environment for everyone, women and men, because it changes organizational culture in which maybe all parents feel welcome as scientists, mothers and fathers. So that's maybe touching also on this narrative, how to open it up also to men. So here maybe these are the 3 points I wanted to make at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katerina. Let's see if we have any further question. If not, so before we take your question, Tim, I just wanted to complement what Maria was saying about the narrative and what you said about everybody's welfare. I think that the reason why we still tend to put on the same line gender with women is precisely because we want to reach everybody's welfare, and it's related to power and the fact that we have systemic imbalance in our society, in our societal structure. And the reason why we are now talking much more about, gender issues are always related to women, but this is also not true, because the reason why we are expanding and we are using more and more intersectionality is also because it's not only women who has been invisible or less, let's say, disadvantaged, but there are, let's say, we can speak about also LGBTQI+, and it's not only women, but it's, let's say, it's a spectrum that now is more and more visible. And I think that the objective is reaching everybody's welfare. So I just wanted to complement with this, and now take the floor for the following question.
Just a quick response to the gentleman, because on Friday in the morning we have a panel about Ukrainian refugees. So if you want to, because there will be some expert, in about the Ukrainian issue. Please come this Friday in the morning at 10.
Thank you, Timothy. So if we don't have any further question, I think that we can stop here, but we can continue discussing probably in a more informal way now at the cocktail reception. So what we take from this discussion, I think that we cannot really separate gender equality from what is research and innovation, because, this is tied with what is like how research systems are designed, how priorities are set, how knowledge is produced, and which topics we decide to fund and to make more visible. So keeping both these policy and academic perspective and also the lived experience will be essential to design also the next framework program. So I would like to thank our panelists for the great discussion and the great contribution, but also thank you you all for being here. And just to let you know that this is just the study that we presented today with Rukudzo is just the first outcome of a work stream on gender equality and gender mainstreaming in research and innovation, and there will be much more about it. So and soon will come. Thank you all, and you're very welcome to join the cocktail reception now. Thanks very much.